So it has just gone to the top of the hour. Given who isn't on yet, I think we should wait a few minutes. I always hate that, but in the interest of a productive meeting, I think we do need to wait. So.
By the way, is the new interface gone? I'm not seeing any star-shaped buttons here.
I was unaware of a new interface, so I don't know.
I think it was in beta during 1.17 with a plan for 100% deployment for 1.18, but not for the interims yet.
Okay.
Good. At least that's what I got.
Yeah. Yeah, the new interface has a much better use of screen real estate. So I was trying to use it as much as possible. It didn't have all the chair functions, but it was really nice as a participant.
People don't usually tell that they are about to be here, but has anyone or that they will not come, but has anyone explicitly indicated that they will be there? That they will be here?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's time to start. So, yeah, Karsten said that Wolf is traveling and won't be here. I know nothing, nothing of whether Anders plans to be here or not. So let's go ahead and get started. Karsten, the slides are yours. Go for it.
Thank you. So there are two items on the agenda today, the diagnostic notation and the deterministic encoding discussion. I have one slide that actually looks at other documents. So one thing is the CBOR timetable document. So we kind of decoupled from sedate. Sedate has run into an AD bottleneck, so that is probably going to resume processing after tomorrow's ISG meeting. So we are still behind, comfortably behind that document. But we probably should do what we discussed in 117 and actually do a publication requested
Yes.
on this document.
And the time, yeah, that's one of the things I'm behind on, but I've been meaning to get time tag into publication requested. So,
Yeah, thank you. So on the CBOR Pact side, I think we still have validation by implementation on our schedule and the use case DNS CBOR. So as vacation time is slowly going to an end in Germany, I think Martin will also have more data to look at. So I think we should look at that at one of the next interims. So that's the not this time slide. So let's just quickly recap with what most of you probably know. CBOR is a representation format, and it comes with two languages: the diagnostic notation, which allows us to look at CBOR without having to decode binary or hex, and CDDL, which allows us to describe data models. And originally we said the diagnostic notation is really a second-class citizen. We don't even define a grammar for it and so on. And it seems that there are now more applications where it makes sense to do that. So the document, the EDN literal document that originally just was meant to provide a way to do domain-specific literals in diagnostic notation, that actually has acquired an ABNF syntax for diagnostic notation and some more information about EDN versus CDDL. These two languages, unfortunately, have very different roots, so they are not similar in places where they could be similar. So I think that's useful to document. I wrote the ABNF a couple of months ago, and when I looked at it again, I immediately found a bug. So that's already on the GitHub as a pull request. And I think we need to work on the other GitHub issues that have been raised, and then maybe go into reviews. So what are those GitHub issues? Well, first of all, announcing that we are going to have another document on diagnostic notation, of course, motivated people to bring their favorite misgivings about JSON-based syntaxes. And we have the usual two already. I don't know whether we will get more. One is the comment syntax. Of course, we already have a comment syntax, but as Christian wrote in issue number 8, that has a problem with having to double up slashes in certain cases. So it would be nice to have a way to handle that. One would be to have something like the /* syntax of C. But yeah, there are a few problems with putting this into ABNF. So maybe the other thing that has been asked for repeatedly are end-of-line comments. And there are 3 candidates for end-of-line comments. The hash mark, the semicolon, which would give some commonality with CDDL, and the double slash, which would give some commonality with JavaScript. And looking at various documents, even actual RFCs, hashmark and semicolon have been seen in the wild, even though they are not officially part of the syntax. So maybe we should just legalize them. The double slash would be more like JavaScript, but it clashes with the existing slash syntax. So I'm not sure we want to do that. So I would probably propose going for hash and semicolon, or just one of them. I'm completely open here, but make sure we have one form of end-of-line comments, and then it's much easier to add information. But we would keep the slash-based comments we have today, because that allows putting in small annotations in the middle of a line, like a key colon value line where you want to have one comment for each side. That's easier to do with those slash-based comments. So that would be my proposal going forward. On the trailing commas, JSON famously creates an editing problem each time you add a line or delete a line at the end of a JSON array or map. You forget to add or delete the comma, and that's just a lot of wasted time. So enabling trailing commas has been requested a lot, and I have written a PR, which, as with the other ABNF, still needs to be tested, but maybe people can have a look at that. So these are essentially the user visible features. There's also a maintenance issue. For some reason, hex floating point didn't make it into diagnostic notation, and that is often useful when working with exact floating point numbers. So I propose adding that. So that would also be a user visible feature, but not one that we inherit from JSON gripes. There are also a couple of ABNF fixes that are out there as pull requests, and that just need to be checked and applied. And finally, there's the editorial issue that we never mentioned, that the basic integer format without dots or exponents gives you integers in diagnostic notation, and anything with dots or exponents gives you floating point values. That's implicit. If you look at Appendix A of RFC 7049, that's already in there, but we never actually thought about writing it down because it was so obvious to many of us, and that's of course not so great. Okay, so we lost Christian, I think. So what I think we need to do here is get some reviews on the GitHub issues and pull requests. I didn't flag anyone specifically, but please put in your reviews if you find something and understand it and like it or don't like it. Ira.
Thank you. I am in favor of adding and of defining the use for end-of-line comments of both pound and semicolon, because one or the other are very widely used in a variety of RFCs, and it seems harmless to enable both, and perhaps to make a recommendation for the use of one over the other. And for that, Karsten and Barry and Marco, Christian, I would suggest you guys chime in. I'm strongly opposed to adding double slash because it just adds too much ambiguity and too many contexts. So that's that one. Thank you. And thank you for noticing hex floating point. Certainly we needed to be explicit about.
Thank you. Any other comments on this part? Okay, so I go to the deterministic encoding documents. So the mailing list has pretty much exploded in the last 2 months with discussion about deterministic encoding. When we originally put this into RFC 7049, we thought, well, nobody is going to use that, but it's so easy to do. Why don't we put it in? So that's why it's in there. And now we have increased attention to this, probably at least partially caused by the need to do privacy-oriented data formats where parts of data structure are blanked out and replaced by hashes, and that's difficult to do if you don't have deterministic encoding. But of course, all the old use cases, some of which we may or may not like very much, are there as well. So that's what's going on, and this has been pushed forward by Wolf McNally's deterministic CBOR document. A number of other documents are there. Anders has written another document which does one thing well. It provides a lot of examples, which we will have to put into the other documents, or the ones that we want to go forward with. But it's not quite clear what this document does, and it doesn't help that there have been like 22 revisions of this document in the last couple of weeks. So I really have to look up which revision is currently active to find out what's in there. Anyway, so this is maybe a useful query for things that should go into one of the other documents. Anders has also submitted that as a document to the independent stream, which I think is not good because we generally don't take documents out of the middle of working group proceedings and make independent stream RFCs out of them.
So in interjecting there, one of the things that Elliot as independent stream editor has asked is for the chairs to weigh in. And I've held back so far because I wanted to have this discussion. But my view is the same thing, that it may be appropriate for Anders's document to go to the independent stream at some point, but not now. We're still having active discussion about what to do with this whole issue. And I think that our input to the independent stream editor should be to hold off until that discussion completes. Does anyone think that that's not the right answer to give to Elliot? Okay, so I will pass that on to Elliot in the thread that he started on this, which has not been copied to the working group mailing list. And I'll let the working group mailing list know what the status is. Carry on.
Okay, given that we have had this in the document for about 10 years and have implementations out there and so on, I thought it might be a good idea to actually write up some of the knowledge that we have acquired and that doesn't necessarily have gone into the update RFC 8949. So I wrote this backgrounder document. I haven't updated this since originally submitted. That's probably next to do, but I hope to have an informational document ready soon that provides all this background information. I mean, people talk about subnormals and have very little idea of why they are relevant to deterministic encoding and so on. So this is really the kind of information that I was trying to capture in this document. So at some point we should decide whether this is useful as an informational working group document, but yeah, we can do this later. We can just collect more information in that. The other document I wrote was trying to get some structure into this by splitting up what Wolf's document did into two parts. One part that deals with encoding and one part that deals with more application specific, or Wolf has suggested saying domain specific issues. So one is really about CBOR, and the other one is really about how do applications in this domain want to handle their data. So I wrote that up. It's probably not perfect, but I think it demonstrates what should be in such a document. And it really tries to express that split. And the split is essentially based on the idea that we can do this in layers. So at the bottom of the slide, we have the CBOR baseline, which is applying to all CBOR instances, of course. And then we add something, which is the core deterministic encoding requirements from RFC 8949, which has a few holes, which I tried to show on this slide. So we put another thing on top of that, which is the common deterministic encoding profile, or CDE for short, that closes those holes and provides us with a common profile. So the basic idea is that there are some things that will be common to the majority, probably not all, but the majority of deterministic encoding applications that use CBOR, and that's CDE. And on top of that, we have domain profiles. And these are, because CDE already handles the bytes of the representation format, the domain profiles really are about mapping data from the application data model, which is often influenced strongly by the platform data model. So when you only have int64 and uint64, then you probably have a certain view of the data that you will send around, and it's good to capture this in a domain-specific profile. But the assumption is that we will have several of those, not hundreds, probably not even tens, but probably there will be a single-digit number of domain profiles at some point. So to provide an alternative visualization here, with CDE in the bottom and dCBOR as an example profile on the top, you can see in the blue cloud, in the bottom cloud, that in this at the serialization level, we often have multiple representations for the same data item. So the data item in the middle cloud, in the green cloud, is a 4, a number 4, an integer 4. And we can represent this in the preferred form, which is just a single byte hex 04, or we can represent it in a longer form for some reason. What the common deterministic encoding does is essentially creating a bijection between the data model items and the serialization items that we prefer to actually see, and that are actually then required in deterministic encoding. The figure may look nice, but it completely hides the fact that CBOR is an extensible format. So it's really hard to maintain the beauty and simplicity of this figure once you add extensions. So that's why common deterministic encoding requires a little bit of work beyond what section 421, actually not 411, defines in the CBOR standard. And then the next step is taking this set of generic data model items. So CBOR has a generic data model. Actually, it has several of them, but I'm not going into the details right now. And this is what CBOR can encode, and the common deterministic encoding creates a bijection between what we want to see on the wire and what we see in our heads in the model. And the next step is to go to the domain and look what would the domain like to do with its data to get a deterministic serialization. And there we have two major items we have identified so far. One is exclusion. So the domain data model may simply say, you cannot represent minus 10 to the power of 19 in this domain data model, which is perfectly fine if the domain doesn't need that. It does create some implementation complexity because it's outside the range of N64 and UN64. So you have to somehow manage negative integers that are more negative than you can express using N64. So you can exclude that. The other function that the domain profile could have is reduction. So it takes several data items that might be handed down by an application and maps them to a single generic data model item. So for instance, the number 4, which is supposed to be an integer number, and the number 4.0, which is supposed to be a floating point number. These are different at the generic data model level. These are different at the application level, at least in most platforms. JavaScript is the one important exception. And what the reduction does is it looks for numbers that are, for floating point numbers that are equivalent to an integer number and converts them to integers in certain specific cases. So this is really the layering that has come out of the discussion, and I'm really glad we had this discussion because the structure of section 4.2 is really a demonstration that we didn't understand all this when we actually wrote up the CBOR update. Okay, so what this work does or is supposed to do from my point of view, so my objectives are we want to facilitate wider use of deterministic serialization for a number of use cases. The backgrounder document has a number of them. Wolf sent a longer list of use cases to the list, to the mailing list today. There are a lot of cases where it helps to have deterministic serialization, and we want to facilitate that without somehow devaluing the unconstrained use of CBOR that we have in many other places. So we would use CDE as a common deterministic encoding profile, as a common set of encoding decisions, which is essentially identical with section 4.2.1 and a few tweaks. And that can be implemented in a generic encoder-decoder. So much of the work that is needed to get deterministic serialization out there would only need to be done once. And then on top of that, we can create one or more simple domain profiles. So we don't need 10 or 20 page documents. We need 1-page documents. And Wolf's DCBOR would be the first instances of that if he thinks that that is what we should do. Otherwise, we could also use another one like Anders' DCBOR if that stabilizes. So the documents that I think should come out of the working group is the informational document if we decide to agree on that. The CDE part of the standards track draft that I wrote, and the domain profile part of which is currently in the same document. So we will see how we handle that. Wolf's proposal is slated as an experimental protocol. I'm not even sure that is necessary, so I think this could go through as a standard track document. Yeah, the question is, can we absorb the information in the other two documents? So we don't need more documents on DCBOR, we just have a single one. Should we split this off from the CDE part, or should we use this as an example, as a motivation for the CDE part, so we can actually make our points in a document that has both layers in it? So this is something we have to decide. I'm pretty sure you want to do the standard track CDE. The other ones, yeah, I think we should just do some more work and see if we like what the outcome is. So I'm not asking for working group adoption at this point. I think that would be too early. Good, and then we have a number of technical issues, or maybe they are really in part editorial issues, but we have to write some text that maybe clarifies the transition between the basic integers, CBOR basic integers, major type 01, and the larger integers that are expressed using tag 2 or 3. We could try to do the same thing for floating point. We have a tag that could be used for an extended precision, extended range floating point. As far as I'm aware, nobody actually has done this, has implemented something like this. So this would be a little bit on the innovative side. But we could make it work, and then we would not run into problems when, for instance, Rust finally gets its F128 type done, and we want to make sure that we have that in the deterministic encoding set, like the other floating point types. Yeah, and then maybe we can do some other IEEE 754 stuff, like how exactly we handle payloads in NAN. So those are little issues that may need to be discussed. I don't think any of this is big, except maybe for the tag 5 integration, but I think that is the work that needs to be done to finish the CDE part of the document. And that's all I had. So comments welcome. Ira.
Certainly to say that CDE should be standards track. And I like your middle ground suggestion of using some of Wolf's profile as an example or examples in the CDE standards track document to encourage people to be careful and rigorous when they write profiles and not requote large bodies of 8049. So that seems important. Is there a reason that you didn't think that the standards, the backgrounder would be, is it that it would be informational? It just that it is context for CDE rather than CDE itself?
I think generally we have made the mistake in the past to put too much informational material into our standards track documents.
Mm-hmm.
And one effect of that is that people look at this and say, oh, this serialization format only has 20 pages of documentation and the other one has 60 pages. So the 60 pages one is likely to be more complicated, and we use the 20-page documentation. I think splitting off informational documents is a good thing we should do more often. And in this case, it came pretty naturally.
Thank you. I think it is a good direction to take for work group for documents. Shorter RFCs that are concise and that don't constantly restate a great deal of thing, as well as having interspersed rationale, are a lot easier to read and to implement. The IEEE 7, whatever the number is, with the NANs, et cetera, the IEEE float 15 something or other. The floating point, is that hard, or is it just hard because it's controversial how to deal with NANs, et cetera? Or is it hard just because it just is? The IEEE source is ambiguous.
I think it's mainly hard because the IEEE source leaves a lot to implementation on not the numbers. And we probably want to extract something that is still useful for those few people who actually want to use NAND payloads. But I think the vast majority of the CBOR applications only need a single NAND value. So that is likely to be what the most people are going for. And I must admit, I haven't actually gone ahead and implemented the rest of the NAND structure because I haven't needed it in the last 10 years. Okay, I don't,
All
Yep.
seem like good suggestions to me. Barry, Christian, Marco, chime in, please.
I like how this is going in a direction that seems to be good both for Wolf and
I also like the overall suggestion. Thanks mostly for the good summary. It helps a lot after the discussion on the list. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good. So I think the challenge is going to be to position this as something that can work with Anders's path. I think it's in our best interest to try to do that, but it may be that eventually, as I said, we may eventually get to a point where we publish what we publish, and then Anders still feels he needs to publish something on the independent stream. But we'll see how that can go and whether we can get something that satisfies his needs, and whether we can fully understand his needs, actually. So
Yeah, that's really the bigger problem. It's not like Anders is talking nonsense all the time. It's just very hard to understand him in some cases, and
yes,
to extract the very valid technical points that he is making. So yeah, we will have to work on that.
okay. Okay, so I think we're good on all of that. That's our agenda. Is there anything else that we need to discuss today?
I should probably mention that I'm not going to be around in 2 weeks.
Okay. We will see if we get something on the agenda for that. That's, otherwise it's our usual thing. If nothing on the agenda by Tuesday, we will cancel it. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you on the mailing list.
Thank you. Thank you for pressing the publication request.
Yes. Oh, I guess I should add that I did finally update the Shepherd write-up during the call, and we're going on time tag. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.